All right.
Yep.
Just for the people that bitch about it, here it is. Monday, we're back again.
Another show.
Another show. Another Monday.
Mondays come up fast, man.
They sure do.
Power and Speed, 908-751-0211.
And like us and rank us 5 stars on Facebook. Well, not Facebook. Just iTunes.
Something.
You tried to improvise, Ted, and just fucking stepped all over yourself.
Darn the luck.
Just do something on something. That's what you ought to say.
Yeah, just do something. But make sure it's 5 stars.
Yeah, just get out and do something.
Yep, iTunes, Facebook,
Yelp.
Join the fan
Yelp.
page too. There's a lot of shit going on.
Do we have
there.
a Yelp page for Power and Speed? I mean,
isn't Yelp food?
Yes.
That's a lot of things.
Don't even get him started.
I'm not.
Just let it go.
So,
well, you guys just ate chicken, so.
Good point, Ted.
Yeah.
Anything exciting happen this weekend? NHRA? Did the NASCAR guys race, Mike?
No, but I do know the NHRA guys raced.
How do you know that?
Because you told me.
Because I was there. Yeah.
Nice.
I was actually going to go. I was going to go with you, Saturday?
Yeah.
But I had too much shit going on here.
Of course. Seriously, did the NASCAR guys race? I think it was Pocono this weekend.
Yeah, I think they did.
And did somebody win? They have
probably
tires on the cars? Burning fuel?
You know,
Cathedral Port heads?
This kind of brings up Mike's retardation. Well, firstly, you know what I want to say? I want to say thank you to everybody that wished me a happy birthday. And that reminded me to immediately find out where to turn that off, because I'm not any good with that shit.
Yep.
Because I feel like, here's what happens. And this is just me. It's what goes on in my head.
Right next to the sexual orientation, right?
Well, that's a whole nother story, but we're not even going to get into that today. So if I log back in and I see I missed birthdays, I feel like a dick. I mean, when they put it there,
right,
it's like they're making you say happy birthday.
Well, that's so you're online and give more,
just more interaction.
Into Zuckerberg's pocket.
So here's the way I do this, that if nobody ever says it to me, I don't have to say it to them, and then I don't have to worry about it, because I don't remember that shit.
You're not antisocial. Facebook tells you every day.
But then do you understand? I feel guilty. If it's a day late.
You are such a social misfit. You know you are.
He's a birthday misfit.
You know how many birthdays I know?
Yours.
Mine, my brother's.
Mom's.
Sort of my mom's. I know it's one or two.
Facebook will tell you about it.
So do I. Same thing with my mom and dad.
Yeah.
I confuse them because they're a week apart.
And I can remember Susan's.
Oh, I know why.
Well, no, because Susan's on her birthday. Listen, we'll just show you what a kind, loving boyfriend I am. I think the second year we were going out, doctor said, your wisdom teeth got to come out. He's like, when can you do it? I was like, well, whenever. He's like, how about April 5th? No problem. Her birthday. I'll never forget it.
Wow. Good man.
But thank you for that, everybody. You know, it was funny. I called you up.
Yeah.
And I said, who's ECR?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
What did you say to me?
I said Earnhart.
Well, I think actually you said, you fucking retard.
Well, yeah, I did say that first, but I don't know if you wanted me to say that. Yeah.
But that was, it was nice that somebody from that area. I honestly, I don't want to give the guy's name out, because then, you know, somebody will start beating on him or whatever.
Yeah, mogul.
Yeah, probably.
He'll tell us everything that's wrong with the guy.
But it's nice, and he's got an impressive resume of stuff he did.
Ted, get in the chat room and tell Mogul I'm going to ban him if he annoys me tonight.
So thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you for the birthday stuff, everybody. That was very nice, unexpected, and will never happen again.
Yeah, sure.
On the note of good stuff, stuff that Mike likes, power stop. I had to redo the front brakes in my truck because they go bad. I beat on them
again.
Yeah,
seems like you just did that.
No, it was probably like it was almost exactly a year to the date.
A year? You got a year out of brakes?
Yeah,
you're brutal.
It's a heavy truck, dude. Took it apart. Boots are gone. They're trashed. Called up Power Stop and said, look, didn't call him. I sent him a mail. Said, look, not writing to abuse you. I'm just telling you that the boots fell apart. This happened, that happened. We'll send you new calipers. Don't worry about it.
Wow.
Sent new calipers.
Just like that.
Just like that. So Power Stop, big thumbs up for, I guess, being an ass kisser.
Yeah, that's nice.
So that was good.
Good for them.
And we'll talk about your equipment later, because I worked on that thing and I never talked about it, but it's actually, we'll go over that. We'll go over that in the end.
Yeah. So we got a pretty good guest tonight, huh?
Yes.
I would imagine so.
Even though the 260 guys didn't know who he was.
Really?
Yeah. By the way, did you follow the 260 guys this weekend? They were at some kind of race and they were live.
No, I didn't show up on mine.
I saw Adam was testing.
Yeah, that's the Malibu, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he was testing and he took video of a bunch of cars. There was a couple pretty cool cars there. A diesel Mustang, a diesel 67 Nova.
I saw, you're right, because I did see, I think I saw some diesel dragster. It was a Power Stroke diesel dragster.
Yep. Craziness.
There we go.
And they were all fast. The Mustang wasn't. The Mustang was a turd. They had something wrong.
Did it run anybody over?
It probably did.
Well, that was a win then.
It probably did somewhere.
I wasn't on Facebook much this weekend. I try not to go on there a lot. Like I go in and I comment in a couple things and then I'm out. I just don't bother.
Well, you did do something with your gender, didn't you?
I tried that. And you can't even have fun anymore. You just can't.
Well, you can, but.
Well, I just made light of it, that it was silly that I had these. I had the ability to pick male, female. When I was looking to hide the birthday.
Yeah.
I had the ability to pick male, female, or I think it said custom.
Yeah.
And I'm like, custom?
Explain how you feel today.
Sounds like me.
And sure enough, I went down, I picked custom, and it gave me a whole big text box I could fill out. So I wrote a creative little passage, and couldn't have been 10 seconds.
And they were on you?
They were on me.
You should have just jumped on a hippo or something like that. It's acceptable.
Sir, you can't identify as a small hippopotamus.
Yeah, actually, on Tucker Carlson, you could. There was a person on there that did. But no, they didn't appreciate my sense of humor. So, whatever.
Yeah.
All right. What else do I have here?
I got nothing.
I actually have a couple things, but I don't want to get too far started into anything.
Yeah, I had a rough weekend with I told you all the construction stuff and all that nonsense.
Oh, it was Nick and his Malibu.
Yeah, Nick won the event. Yep.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, those guys must be legit.
No, not only that, they are some working individuals.
Yeah,
they had a broken motor and they like live streamed 3/4 of them changing it. They
just get together and get it done.
Yeah. Yep.
That's pretty cool.
Amazing.
Good guys.
Much harder than I would want to work,
yeah,
to say the least.
Well, you told us already. If you got to change a lug nut, that's about the extent of it.
Yeah, there it would be.
Well, a lug nut's different, kind of. So, Tad, what do you got? Anything exciting happen? How's your car? Oh, that's
it's
right.
still silver with a black hood, and
but you are
moldy.
making progress now. Your motor's together, right?
The long block's been together now. It's just the doodads are getting added. Covers, belts, cam sensors.
Doodads?
Yeah,
Oh, is this your guy?
Maybe.
Ooh, say, check it out.
You're on, buddy. Who's this?
Hi, it's Simon from Bedfordshire.
Ah, a proper knob.
Simon. G'day. Oh, no, that's Australia.
How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good.
I'm very well, thank you. A bit late, but it was worth staying up for.
Yep. Yeah, because for you, it's what, like just after midnight?
6 hours, 13, 1 o'clock.
Midnight, yeah.
No, midnight.
Oh, yeah, midnight, yeah.
So I talk to Simon quite often on the messenger and everything else. What is that thing you're involved with? It's a road race class, right?
Yeah, we do a thing called MSVR. It's Track Day Championship. Name of the team is Big Skids Racing Team on Facebook. We have a Mark 6 Fiesta. It's a German Cup car. It's got a 2-litre Duratec in it, all built. Yeah, and we race at tracks around the UK. All good fun. I'm just the pit crew. I'm not the driver.
Oh,
I've been there.
Crew guy.
Well, I've watched the video of the car, and it's I mean, like, don't look at it and say, well, it's not GT late model or anything like that. Those guys, it's really competitive.
No, I'm sure it's cool.
It's really neat stuff.
He certainly knows how to wheel it. Kester does, yeah. He knows how to drive.
So, what is like road racing the primary form of motorsports over there, or what is it?
Yes, definitely. We do have a drag racing scene. It is getting bigger, but at the moment there is no sort of there's no money in the scene, if you like, so no one's really covering it, and it doesn't give the industry much growth. I have friends who have a pro mod team. Pro mod is getting quite big, sort of getting bigger than sort of the fuely stuff. We have sort of the weekend warrior type, just sort of ride and drive test days. But circuit racing is far bigger, yeah. So we have, I think there's only 2 drag strips in England at the moment.
I was just going to ask you, how many drag strips are actually there?
Just 2?
Yeah, just 2. And the rest are just like converted runways that get used every now and then.
Wow.
We have Santa Pod is the biggest one, and we have Shakespeare County Raceway.
Got it. I always knew. Sorry, Simon. I always knew that the circuit racing was bigger there, and it's kind of starting to catch on here now, getting better. Because a lot more track days here, a lot more time attack. But drag racing was always our thing.
They built that one here in New Jersey. What is it, Millville?
Yeah.
Isn't that where it is?
Is that where it was?
Yep. Jersey Motorsports Park.
Yeah, and you can go down there and, just go race.
It's a real deal racetrack, too.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be beautiful.
I think they have 2 circuits, a long circuit, a short circuit. They race all kinds of stuff there. Go-karts, shifter carts.
Yep.
All kinds of crazy stuff.
We should go there. Put that on a list of stuff that we should do, and we're never going to.
We're never going to do
it.
New Jersey's Nürburgring?
Yeah.
So the funny thing is, Simon, this particular Pro Mod guy that you're talking about kind of ties into the guy we have coming on tonight, doesn't he?
Yeah, Mr. Shane T. I've actually spoken to Shane a few times on Facebook because he tuned Andy Frost's car. And I'm part of that sort of Facebook group, and he's amazing to talk to. Like really, really open, really willing to share knowledge. To the point where Andy's sort of saying, "Are you sure you want to be giving all this away?" But no, he was more than willing to sort of answer questions to people who are in that group and stuff. So he's really, really clever guy.
Yeah, actually, he told me the Andy Frost story, and I think we're going to touch on it tonight. Mm-hmm. But the whole Andy Frost story is really cool. I'm not going to give any detail away. Okay. But it's neat how they met and how that all came about. Because apparently Andy Frost is a regular guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean, regular guy?
Just a regular guy.
Yeah.
He's not.
And then came over here with,
He's not some zillionaire that, just flies around in jets and gets whatever he wants.
What, that sold electronics online and, made his money that way?
Yeah, that way. Viper.
The inside Tad jokes just keep going.
Sorry, Simon. You were saying?
No, I was just saying, with Andy, he is, like you say, he is a home-built kind of guy. He's self-made. He doesn't have big corporate sponsors or anything like this. He has to raise money for his car mostly through his Facebook page. Like he'll auction off old engine parts, this kind of thing. I'm actually looking at one of his camshafts right now on my coffee table. I have that standing up next to my lampshade.
Okay.
That's next to a Pro Mod piston and next to a Pro Mod conrod. I have engine parts all around my lounge.
Nice. That's a style all its own.
Yeah, it's a style. That's what girls like, but it's a bachelor pad right now.
I got to tell you, I'm still blown away at the reach that this thing turned into. Like, I'm looking at the chat group. By the way, apparently, Mr. Frost is in the chat room.
Yeah, he is.
And right near him, like rolling through the windows, we have Aaron.
Yeah, who's in Australia.
Who's in Australia.
Yep.
I mean, this is crazy. This is really crazy.
Yep. Just for us.
I always do my best to push the podcast on my friends and anyone who listen over in the UK. So I'm spreading the word for you.
We really appreciate that. We appreciate it.
We do appreciate it, and I kind of feel bad because I say the same thing to everybody. And these guys will tell you I'm super critical. Like I'm never happy. I'm like it was all right. I mean, it just I always look at it that they all can't be winners, but what we really hope is people take some stuff away from this that they can apply.
Yeah.
That's the main thing.
Did you mention you're never happy?
No. Yeah, I'll get into that.
Yeah, you're never happy.
I know. Social
it's
misfit,
too
blah,
cold,
blah, blah.
Yeah.
Whatever. It was cold.
I think people do.
I started.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I started out listening to like 10 podcasts. I'm now down to like 2. I listen to you guys and Chief and Sean. Chief and Sean is more sort of entertainment, and you guys are the technical stuff.
Where the true information.
Just crap. They just suck so bad. It is just it's like one guy sitting in a room with a pair of headphones laughing at his own jokes. So, I think you're too hard on yourself.
Yeah, well,
that would be me.
Kind of, yeah, I was going to say, kind of like what Tad does.
All right, well, Simon, man, thank you for staying up, and more than anything, thanks for calling in and spreading the word. We do appreciate it. And I'll be hitting you up on Facebook whenever I'm on there.
I'll speak to you soon.
All right,
okay,
see you,
man.
buddy.
Thanks, man.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh, we got Shane.
We do have Shane.
Ooh.
Shane T., welcome to the show.
Hello?
Hey, how are you, sir?
Yes, I'll have a medium pepperoni, black olive, sausage, and mushroom.
That's what I was going to do. That's what I was going to do.
You could not have said pepperoni on the most inopportune night. It's actually funny. How are you, man?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Good. We were. This is Tom. Mike's here. Tad's here.
Yep.
We were just talking to a guy who I guess has had some interaction with you. What's Simon's last name, Mike?
I don't know.
Laban?
Hughes?
No,
I don't remember.
Probably not Simon the Bond.
I know. Yeah, he knows. I guess he's sort of affiliated with Andy Frost, and he was just saying he spoke to you at one time. And so anyway.
Oh, it might be. I remember talking to a guy who was doing a pro mod that came to Gainesville actually last year when we were there for the. Or was it last? Yeah, it was last year. 2016 Gainesville. Maybe that's him. It seemed like his name was Simon, but I guess everybody in England seems like their name might be Simon.
It could be Simon. So
now I've got the whole UK pissed off. So
nah, just the Simons. So we are glad to have you. I don't quite know where to begin. I mean, we have so much stuff to get to. Why don't you do what you do best and give us a little bit of info? How did you start? What you're doing?
I'm charging you by the minute, so we can take as long as you want.
Okay, that's fine. I can't wait to get this bill, by the way.
You're already going to owe Paul 100.
I'm sure that bill will be exactly what it costs for me to be on this show. Somehow those will equal each other out.
Yeah, they will. They will. So
anyway, what do you want me to do?
I don't know. Let's talk about stuff. Let's talk about car stuff. Yeah. Tell us who you are and what you do, because nobody knows.
Yeah.
Right. So I have been around cars pretty much since I came out of the womb. My dad was a high school auto shop teacher, and he owned a car repair shop. When I was born, he had a 32 Roadster in the garage that he was building and a bunch of motorcycles, and I used to go out there when I was old enough to walk and rifle through his toolbox and take his tools out and mix them all up and scatter them around. And so anyway, so the bottom line is when you have a dad who's an auto shop teacher and he's building a 32 Roadster in your garage when you're born, then you pretty much are predestined to have something to do with cars for the rest of your life.
Yep.
So in a roundabout manner, it's pretty much his fault that I'm the way that I am.
Or to his credit, depending on how you look at it.
Or depending on how you look at it, indeed. So, I always had an interest in it. I really couldn't get my fingers in the pie until I was old enough to stop playing with bicycles and start playing with engines. And I started doing that about probably 14 or 15 years old. And then later, after high school, I went to a couple of technical trade schools where they were teaching you how to become an automotive technician. And I later became an automotive technician, and then my dad had started another company, and he actually started it in '84, but it was a telediagnostic service. So what that means in today's terms is it was a call center where automotive repair shops all over the country would call with technical questions on diagnosing problems on street-driven cars, anywhere from no start to hesitation, or we pretty much worked on everything other than internal automatic transmission stuff. So these guys would pay for the service. And
what year was this?
And my dad he started it in '84.
That's pretty out front of it.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That was really his struggle, I think, in '84 was how do you sell it? I mean, first of all, you're selling it to a bunch of automotive technicians or mechanics. And right off the bat, there's an ego problem. No one wants to say they have to ask for help. So that was hard. But what made it viable was the fact that computers were installed on street-driven cars in the U.S. in about 1980 to meet federal emission standards. And the problem was that those cars by 82, 83, and 84 were starting to come out of warranty, and they weren't going back to the dealer to get repairs. So your standard everyday Quadrajet on top of a small block Chevy that came in the shop now has fucking wires hanging out of it everywhere.
Yeah.
A bunch of weird sensors on it.
Tick, tick, tick.
And I think I just cussed, so I wonder who won the When's He Gonna Curse pool. Someone will have whatever minute this is.
Yeah, we really don't give a shit.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter.
Anyway, the point is, no one had any information about these cars in 83 and 84, and so they were up a creek. If you didn't have training and it wasn't really very much available, you were kind of screwed. If one came in your shop, you could just try stuff and then basically not fix it. So it made the call center concept viable. And then what happened? This is a sidetrack. This is not necessarily about me directly, but about my dad's company, obviously. So what happened was, first Shell Oil Company came knocking on his door, and they were interested in. They weren't at all interested in fixing cars, but they are interested in selling gas. And at that time, there were lots of Shell gas stations around the country that were also car repair shops. And so Shell was smart enough to recognize that if these guys went out of business because they couldn't fix cars, they wouldn't be selling gasoline anymore, and that was bad. So they approached my dad and said, listen, what we want to do, we want to use your service to try to make our Shell Auto Care dealers profitable. So we want to sign up every one of them that we have in the whole country. So that started in about 1986, and this company went from 3 people to about 15 people almost overnight in order to meet that demand, because it went from maybe 300 clients to like 2,500 clients. So the next thing that happened was about 88 or 80, I think 88, CarQuest Auto Parts contacted them and said, okay, so what we have is a bunch of returns on electrical parts for cars, because the guys that are buying the parts from the parts store are just shooting from the hip, guessing that, hey, this thing, maybe it needs a map sensor, put a map sensor. Oh, no, map sensor's not it, so send it back. So they were having all these returns on electrical parts that were supposedly bad that weren't actually bad. And so they thought, man, if we could sell this service through our parts stores to mechanics that buy parts from us, we could help those mechanics not send all of our electronic parts back saying they were bad, and we wouldn't have to pay for all this warranty on this stuff. So they partnered with them. They signed up a whole another group of people through CarQuest, and it probably about 91, Snap-on started knocking on the door, and
wow,
one came in, and we did a little bit of a thing with them where the service was sold through the Snap-on dealers on the trucks to technicians in the shops. But eventually they had their eyes on the prize, and they wanted to own the thing.
Yeah.
And my dad, being the kind of guy he is, told them they could never buy it from him. And as soon as he told them that, they had to have it. And so he made sure that when they bought it from him in '96, that he would never have to go to work again. So my dad's been effectively retired since '99. Now, the reason why that's important for my story is because after I graduated high school in '92, I went to work in a shop for a couple of years, and then at some point my dad was able to offer me a job working for him. So it was like, yeah, of course I want to go do that. And if you want to talk about a learning experience, you're working with 20 or 25 extremely intelligent, hand-picked technicians that my dad had hired to man this service, and you get to go sit with them on a daily basis and talk to people on the phone. Typically we would take probably 25 to maybe 40, 45 calls per person per day. And so, yeah, you get a hugely accelerated learning curve on particularly on diagnostics.
Yeah,
how
so you
diagnose a problem.
Yep,
how do you narrow something down?
So you were in school
and
all day.
Yeah, wide ranging too.
Yeah.
You know, people aren't just calling about a Chevy or a Ford or whatever. It's everything.
No, it was funny. Back then we used to laugh because we worked on everything, because you could get a Hyundai, next might be a Corvette, then it's a dump truck, then it's whatever. But it was funny then. What was instilled upon me working there really was the fact that it was much more important to understand the concept of how something worked than it was to understand the particulars of how it worked. In other words, it's more important to be able to understand how an ignition module generically functioned, because you could apply that to every ignition module / igniter there was in existence. Didn't matter whether it was a Honda or a Chevy or a Ford. They all had subtle differences, but at the end of the day, they all had a signal in and a signal out. They all needed powers and grounds to work correctly. And so the concept was much more important than the specifics, and the computer system that he had written was in charge of keeping track of the specifics. So you didn't have to memorize what the pins were on that Ford TFI module for the E4 that you were working on. You didn't have to know what the ignition module pinout was for the HEI system you were trying to work on. The computer kept track of that information, and if you had the knowledge to understand how it functioned in general, you could just use the computer to tell the guy exactly what to look for and what to pinpoint. But we used to laugh because, I remember one guy that called me and said, I work on Fords all day long. I've got this Chevy. It's like my uncle's car. I have to work on it, and this thing doesn't start. And I've been through the basics already, and it has injector pulse, and it has fuel pressure, and it has spark. He's like, but man, I am used to looking at Ford spark, and this fucking Chevy spark I can't tell if it's right or if it's wrong. And I remember chuckling to myself thinking, yeah, because it's so much different. The Chevy spark was so much different.
Somebody would have to really explain that to me, that a guy could actually tell you Chevy spark or Ford spark. I'm kind of baffled.
Well, this has kind of given us an indication as to why his depth of knowledge is so deep now. So you started at the ground floor learning about every little sensor and module and everything. And
yeah, so the training course that I took, the reason I was able to be part of it is that my dad was doing this thing with ROP. At that time, in the late 80s and early 90s in Southern California, they had closed down a lot of the aerospace giants like Rockwell and Northrop and whatever else. They had consolidated them, and they had basically laid off a whole bunch of their engineers. And so this company, along with ROP, had partnered with my dad's company to do a training program, taking these people that were interested to start a new career in automotive technology, I guess. They had a training seminar set up where we went and did training during the day, and then part of that training was that we were placed in a shop to work on regular actual cars for the shop, and we had job sheets that we had to complete, and then we would actually call my dad's company and talk to the technicians there and report back on our job sheet. So that was kind of the test, right? You were supposed to take a VAT-40 and load the charging system on a car and answer questions about what you experienced or what happened, and then talk to someone on the other end of the phone who would ask you about those questions, someone that was knowledgeable about it, and then they could tell really whether you got it or you're just trying to bullshit them, or you didn't know your ass from a hole in the ground. So it was really a very well orchestrated, nice closed loop training setup. So not only that, I mean, literally, I was a 22-year-old kid. No, was I 20? Yeah, I was probably 20. 20-year-old kid in training with guys that were ex-rocket scientists.
Legit.
So it was the only school that I ever went to that I could not wait to get up in the morning to go to school. And when it ended at the end of the day, I couldn't wait to go back the next day to learn more. We started with obviously the basics. And look, my dad being a auto shop teacher and me having a car background before that ever even started, which I'll get into that in a minute. To actually go to formal school, put all those ideas together with some training, and then start talking about how a carburetor functions and how a computer-controlled a C3 GM carburetor worked, and then how a port fuel injected engine worked, and all of to be able to build on what would have been probably 20 years worth of learning from. Look, I didn't sit down and go through a training course at 10 or 12 with my dad, even though he was technically an auto shop teacher. It's just something we always talked about, right? But still, you don't really know it until you get that formal training on it, and then you're like, wow, I really am able to put all this stuff together. But that wasn't even the best part of it. The best part was once I worked for his company and putting that into practice every single day. And man, I'm telling you that the amount of gray area that exists, in diagnosing something on a car, man, and especially when it's not your hands doing it, you have to trust that the guy on the other end is telling you the truth, that he knows how to use a meter correctly, and if he doesn't, then you have to figure out how to get him to use the meter correctly to get the result that you want. Anyway, it was awesome. Look, it's given me the ability to use those skills even today, working on race cars or whatever it is that I'm playing around with.
Kind of formed your analytical skills, for everything automotive.
100%.
Must have given you an astronomical amount of patience, because I know what it's like if I'm trying to walk somebody through something and you're asking them to perform whatever step, and they're basically asking you the equivalent of like, okay, where's the power button?
Look, I'm sure everybody's done this at some point or another. You've had your mom or your cousin or your sister or whoever on the phone, and they're looking at their computer, and you're trying to tell them how to open the browser, and you're like, look, just go down to the start button. There's no start button. Fucking bullshit. I know there's a start button there. So there's no doubt. It is an exercise in patience, and man, you had the same. What I didn't realize then, I thought was only automotive related or automotive repair related. But once I started working on race cars, I realized it's just a cross section of humanity, because we had the same kinds of people working on regular street cars. And what I mean by that is you'd have, a really sharp guy who just called every once in a while and needed just a little bit of information, and off he went and he fixed it. That was very, very few and far between. Then you had a large number of guys that were pretty sharp, but also had a major attitude problem. And what those guys wanted is they wanted you to come to the same conclusion that they came to, so they wouldn't have to feel bad that they couldn't fix the car because, you couldn't fix it either. Now, we always eventually fixed everything we worked on, but that group of guys was the hardest group to work with. Then the guys below that would have been some guys that had not very much knowledge, but were willing to listen. They knew that if they did what you said, it would work. And those guys were brilliant because they were like an extension of your hand. You just told them, put the red lead of the meter here, put the black lead there, turn the knob until it says V, and tell me what the screen says.
Those are the best people to work with, because they don't know enough to get crossed up.
They know if they just listen and do what you say, it will work. So, sometimes it's hard. They say, look, I've got 5.3, 0.4, 0.2 volts. Like, okay. Is it 5.3 or what? Yeah. So, but anyway.
Yeah.
It was good. I would not trade a second of it. I could not do what I do today without all of that background in that part of it.
So what you do today, there was a few years that you were at Motec. Give us a short version of that, because that had to be awesome.
Derailed. That was my short version, by the way. I'm still in the middle of my short version.
Okay. We'll have at it.
And by the minute.
I know that.
By the word. Okay. So anyway, so Snap-on takes over my dad's company. I worked for them from 96 until 2001. By 2001, we changed from a small company led by one guy. It was very dynamic. And right or wrong, if you had an idea, a question, whatever, you went in, you asked it, you got shot down, or that was a good idea. You had your answer, you were done, and it was over with. Snap-on came in. That's not how they worked. They were a bit more of a corporate entity, and things had to be run through management and man, we had lots of meetings about, so I realized I was not cut out to be in the corporate world. So I basically left Snap-on in 2001. I think we came to a mutual agreement that it would be a good idea for me to leave. So I left Snap-on. I thought, I'm just going to go back and work on streetcars. I've got a buddy down the street's got a shop. I'll just get my toolbox, roll it in. I called him. He said, no problem. And once again, it was my dad that stepped in and said, listen, you don't have to get a job right now, right? You have a little bit of money saved up. But the problem is, if you go work on streetcars, that will be all you ever do. You will be in that shop until you're too old to walk. So why don't you think about what you maybe always wanted to do? And he suggested, why don't you go see, what the deal is over at Motec? Okay, so now I'm going to digress into how that would have even been a part of the subject. So in about the mid-'80s, let's say 83, 84, my dad went and started his business in this industrial park in Huntington Beach. And probably about 84, 85, there was this guy driving around with a Volkswagen van, and he was selling diagnostic equipment out of his van that he had built that was made for CIS K-Jetronic fuel injection. That was the constant injection system that they used starting in about the mid-'70s on lots of the European cars. And a lot of the fittings, were metric and banjos and a bunch of stuff that mostly your average fuel pressure gauge from your Snap-on guy or whoever didn't come with the right fittings. And so this guy specialized in providing this test equipment. Well, this guy's name was Jim Munn. Jim Munn is now the owner of Motec USA. Mm-hmm. So Jim Munn pulled up in his van and knocked on my dad's door and said, hey, I sell this stuff. My dad's like, oh, cool, that's awesome, really neat. Except I don't really need it, but we can definitely recommend people to call you or whatever. And off Jim Munn went, and we never thought another thing about him for a number of years. Okay, about when I told you that I was about 14 when I started really playing with engines. When I was 14, the summer that I was probably 8th grade, I went down to my dad's business next door to it in order to do research. He had a small workshop next door to the business where what they would do is go rent a new car, right? And they would come take that rental car all apart to figure out how the mass airflow sensor worked, how the map sensor worked, how the ignition module worked, how to do tests on all of them with common shop tools like a test light and stuff that most guys had, and then bolt the car back together, take it back to the rental car company, say thanks a lot, and then that was it. So they did R&D in that little shop.
That's particularly funny to us.
Yeah, that's good shit.
Anyway, the point is there was enough stuff in there to get. There was a welder and there was a drill press and a bench grinder and some of the sort of standard. Wasn't a fab shop by any means, but I wanted to build a go-kart. So I got a Briggs & Stratton engine and I got some square tube out of the scrap bin pile and got the stick arc welder out and started trying to stick arc this stuff together, and eventually built this kind of pseudo go-kart the summer that I was 14. Well, probably about 2 days after I had the thing completely assembled, I drove it up and down the street and went, that's good. This is way too slow. And I had been looking at consequently part of this little shop was, when stuff was broken in the field, and sometimes the guys on the phone would say, hey, why don't you send me that fuel injector? Why don't you send me that fuel pressure regulator? Why don't you send me that measure of airflow sensor if you don't mind, because we'd like to see it here. So there was a shelf with a bunch of car parts on it. Well, one of the things that was on there was a smog pump. And a smog pump's just an air pump to pump air into the exhaust. But for me, it looked like a perfect supercharger.
No, you didn't.
So I get the welder out and I build a bracket and I put another V-belt pulley on the crankshaft and hook it to the. So it's got the clutch on the outside and the V-belt on the inside running the smog pump. I take the output of the smog pump and I stick it in the top of the Briggs carburetor where the air filter goes, and it pretty much immediately shuts off. I mean, because it's not a Briggs & Stratton carburetor, at least on a 2-horse horizontal shaft Briggs. It's meant for idle, basically. It's got one adjustment screw, and that's pretty much it. I think it has a pull choke too, but other than that, I mean, there's not a whole lot there. It's not ready for
a supercharger.
Kind of change in charge density. Anyway, so there's a guy about 5 doors down from the shop that does quarter midget engines. And so I wander down there, and he gives me this pumper carburetor, and he's like, you put this on there. This will be way better. So in the meantime, someone tells me that I need to not be blowing through the carburetor. It was probably him. The guy's name was Dick Shelton. So Dick probably told me, don't let it drop. Put the carburetor on the other side of the blower so it can suck through the blower. So I did that, and that worked way, way, way better. But you had this problem where if you got the thing to idle pretty good and then you went after the throttle, it would either be too lean or it would be too rich because the fuel was puddling up inside the blower, and then when you whack the throttle, it all goes all over the port wall and whatever it does, and the engine doesn't run right. So one of the guys that worked for my dad, a guy named Jeff Ellis, was probably, in his mid-20s, and he came over, was interested in what I was doing, and told me, why don't you put electronic fuel injection on it? And I'm like, okay, what's electronic fuel injection? So he digs through the bin at the back of the shop and finds an injector and goes, well, this is an injector, and the fuel comes out this end and it goes in this end. So get this end hooked to, the engine in between the blower and the intake, and put fuel on here's a fuel pump and here's a regulator. Hook all this shit up, and I'll come over after work and I'll show you how we could build an electrical circuit that will trigger off of the points in the magneto and fire this injector, and then it'll do everything you want it to do. So I'm like, that sounds awesome. So he came over, and 2 years later, we're then making our own circuit boards for this little, effectively an electric fuel injection system. My go-kart ideas went completely out the window. By now I have the engine mounted on a stand because I know there's no chance I'm ever driving it in my go-kart because we're always fiddling with this electronic or electric fuel injection, trying to make it work right.
So let's be clear here for everybody. This was not, as we know it, electronic injection with addressable, and this was an electrical circuit to fire the injector.
Yeah, it was effectively a 555 timer and some resistors and a variable potentiometer and a switch or two that would allow the signal to come from the crankshaft. Tell the 555 timer, okay, here's the signal, and the 555 would output a square wave that was a certain width. And then we used that square wave to drive the injector, and it was timed to the crank, but it wasn't any kind of computing happening in there. There was no processor. It didn't have memory in it. It was really an electric fuel injection system, and we didn't have anything other than a switch to indicate that it was idle. So we effectively had an idle pulse width and a not idle pulse width, if you want.
Wow.
But with no load on the engine, again, at this time it's on a stand. That was fine. It would really, all we were doing is just letting it idle and snapping the throttle open, just listening to it, trying to get the pulse width close enough that it would take the throttle and be clean like that. And man, it turned in. It was the best thing ever. It really was. But when I think back on it, so that thing, again, like I said, it something that was going to take one afternoon was 2 years later. We were still monkeying with it. We eventually did really get it to work pretty well. But this little engine, we got rid of the mag because the mag was making too much noise with the electrical circuit.
Oh yeah, okay.
And we didn't quite have this. But here's the thing. We were using a lab scope. So at 14, 15, and 16, I'm getting a real huge introduction into the fundamentals of electronic fuel injection. I know it wasn't electronic, right? It didn't have a computer. There was no processor. But still, the function of an injector, how it works, how to hook a lab scope to it, how to measure the pulse width, how to measure the crank sensor signal with a scope. I'm doing this at 14, 15 from this guy, Jeff Ellis, who's taken the time to teach me this. So eventually, the short story is, we had an ignition module. We used
There are no short stories. Go ahead.
No, there's no short stories with me ever. But so we used the coil out of a Buick V6, I think, was a later model one, so it's a twin output, like, DIS coil. And we had that with 2 plugs in the top of the head. So we found somebody to weld the head up so we could put a second plug in it. We cut the flywheel down, so we got rid of the weight of the flywheel. So it had its own ignition control and fuel control, and we were running it on nitro. And I'm here to tell you, when we started running 80 or 90% in that thing, you would start it and hit the throttle. It would lay a candle out of the little header that I built for it, like 3 feet in the air, just like a real fuel car.
It's fun.
We finally got a boost gauge on it. It would make about 30 pounds of boost when you crack the throttle open.
Oh my God!
It sounded like no Briggs and Stratton you've ever heard in your life. I mean, the guys that worked for my dad in the shop just shared a wall with this little. I mean, they would say, "Listen, you can't run that during the day. We can't hear the guys we're trying to talk to on the phone." So that was awesome. And so the reason why I was going there was that so when I realized this little Briggs and Stratton thing's never going to happen. When I'm 16, I get a job at the Shell station. While I'm sitting there in between pumping gas for people, I start laying out the drawings to build a little miniature dragster. So I'm going to put this blower engine in it, and I never do. But my dad gives me his 250cc dirt bike engine out of his dirt bike, and we stick that in it, and then we stick the fuel injection off of the Briggs on the 2-stroke, and the little injector that we originally had out of the pile in the back of the shop that was plenty big enough even for 100% nitro on this Briggs & Stratton is nowhere near enough volume to keep up with a 250cc dirt bike motor, even on gas. So here's where Motec steps in. Motec is in the same business park that my dad's business was in. So my dad goes, well, we'll go over to Motec and see what they've got for an injector. So we went over to Motec, and I met Jim Munn, and I met George Clark, and we told them what we were doing, and they rolled their eyes and thought it was kind of cool, but they were interested, and we were looking for an injector, and so they said, here, this is what the Indy cars run. This is the biggest EFI injector known to man. This is the biggest thing anyone will ever have. This is a 96 pound per hour Multec fuel injector. So they sold us one, and we stuck that in the 2-stroke, and then off it went. And then I really never had anything to do with Motec again until 2001, when I quit working at Snap-on and went to Motec, and then I started begging them for a job starting in September. And in November of 2001, they rolled over and said, probably because they were tired of me showing up all the time asking if I could have a job, they finally figured we might as well hire him because he's not going away. And so they did. And so it was probably one of the 2 or 3 best things that's ever happened to me in my life.
And you were how old then at that time?
2001. So I was 27.
Okay. Wow. And you worked for them for, well, I mean, tell us some of your...
I worked for them from November of 2001 until the end of 2005. And then I started doing this stuff on my own. But the reason I started doing it on my own, when you work at Motec, you go, I was hired as the backup tuner to George Clark, who had been the only guy to go out and do engine management support for all of time that Motec existed in the States, from like probably 89 or 90 all the way up to that point. And there wasn't really a second guy that they could send out for engine management support. And so, of course, I wanted to do it. I didn't know how yet, but I wanted to do it. And they hired me as a backup. You take the stuff, because George has like almost worked himself to death. We need him to be able to take a break. We need you to take up the slack. But, George had been doing this since the late 80s. George was probably, by 2001, was probably in his early 50s. And it's very, very easy in this industry to become cynical. And he was totally cynical. And with George, you got what you got. And usually when you called George, he would tell you the reason why whatever you were working on wasn't working because you're a stupid ass. And he probably was right most of the time. But the problem is that most people don't want to hear that when they're calling for help or when you're trying to sell them something. Like, it seems, I'm not much of a salesman, but it seems like when you tell somebody that what they're using is dog shit and they're fucking stupid for using it. You should use this instead. Some people like that, but not very many.
We know that guy.
Yeah, we know you had him on last week.
Yes.
That was even better what I was thinking.
So anyway, right away I became the point guy for Motec in the U.S. They had just started Motec East in North Carolina, and I was the traveling tuner for Motec in the U.S. If you called Motec and you wanted an engine tune, and it was somewhere outside of Southern California, or even if it was in Southern California, I probably was going to be called to come and do it. And in the meantime, I was doing track support in American Le Mans Series and Grand American Road Racing Series. And in probably 2002, I started helping Vance and Hines in NHRA Pro Stock Bike. And so once again, we go back to that accelerated learning curve that I had in the early and mid 90s working for my dad's company. Okay, step into 2001 and you go full throttle for 4 years working at Motec every single day. All you do is tune stuff all day long. Even a dumb guy like me, after 4 years, is pretty good at his job by then. So the thing is, you go parade around in front of all these team owners working on all these different cars, and from time to time, these team owners say to you, what's it going to cost to have you come and work for us? Because we'd rather just pay you instead of paying Motec or whatever it is. And sometimes they offer you something reasonable, and sometimes most often they don't. But in 2006 or the end of 2005, a guy named Christian Rado put his money where his mouth was and said, I want to hire you to become my crew chief for 2006, running my pro front wheel drive for compact car. I had worked with him a little bit in mid 2005 trying to help him with his car. And I told him at the time, like, listen, man, I can make the engine run. I can do whatever you want with all this electronics. But the bottom line is you kind of don't have the crew doesn't have much direction here. So no matter how successful we are with the electronics, the team won't be successful without a leader. And so he put his faith in me and asked me if I wanted to do it and made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And I had to go to my boss, who I was totally happy with, but I had to tell him, listen, I have to go try this, and he said, I get it. I did that one time. I understand. Good luck. I left on the absolute best of terms. To this day, I'm still treated as though I'm an internal Motec employee. So it worked out. And part of my deal in 2006 was like, listen, I want to come and work on your team and I'll give you 100%. But during those times when I'm not working on your team, I want the opportunity to go be a private contractor and work on the sports car teams that I was working on, work on, whatever else I've been doing. I don't want to be tied down to only the race car. And he was totally cool with that. And, I owe a lot of what I'm doing today to Christian Rado for giving me that opportunity in 2006 to be able to do that. I mean, it was basically jumping out of the plane with a golden parachute.
Mm-hmm. I never had one of them. I'll find one day. So you move on to what you're doing, and
yeah.
I got a list of questions. I don't even know where to start. Tell us a story. Give me a different.
I know what I want to know.
Okay, go.
I got to know the guy sitting across from me, Cletus, Ted. Sorry, he is a F1 guy. So he picked up right away that picture that I put up was you with some F1 people.
Oh yeah, that picture, the famous. I love that picture, by the way. So the way that worked was I've been working since 2007 in Bahrain for Ibrahim Kanu and his racing team. So the F1 story, without going back and telling that whole history, the F1 story is probably 3 years ago by now, maybe 4 years ago. Well, I'll tell you what it was. It was the last year that they ran V8s in Formula One. They were switching to six-cylinder turbos the next season.
Right.
So whenever that was, 3-4 years ago. We were at the Bahrain International Circuit testing EK's drag cars. And F1 had a tire test during the day at the circuit. So we weren't supposed to be able to show up until like think 6 o'clock when they were done. But they would let us go to the garage at 4:30, and we could work in the garage. And then the F1 guys would be done at 6, and then we would start testing, I think, at 7 over on the drag strip. And the F1 garages, the garage that we use is the F1 garage. Actually, we use the FIA scrutineering garage there at the Bahrain International Circuit. And the F1 guys were pitted, I don't know, 6 or 8 garages down from us. So the first day we get there, we can hear these cars, but we're not supposed to go outside. We're not supposed to look at them and all this stuff, and we can hear them. And I'm like, everybody's excited. And then the testing stuff gets over. We're allowed to open the garage doors into pit lane, and we start the cars and warm them up, and we put the 10.5 Supra on the 2-step. And it makes a lot of noise when it's on the 2-step inside of the building. It definitely will get your attention.
You can imagine.
So the next thing I noticed, there's all these F1 guys ran out into the pit lane to see what is exploding at the other end of the track. Drag racers are caught something on fire, and the whole of the F1 circuit's going to go down in flames. But anyway, maybe an hour later, they come walking by the other end of the garage as they walk past our garage towards the parking lot to get in their cars. So I see them walk by the first night, and it's like, okay, that's kind of cool. All the F1, that's cool. So the next day we get there, same thing. They're running around the racetrack. We open the garage doors. We put the car on the 2-step. Maybe 3 minutes after we shut the car off, there's an F1 car on the rev limiter down 8 garages down. And they're obviously doing this because they weren't doing this before, and it's up on down on the rev limiter, right? So now we come out of the garage to look, and they're all standing out there on the other side of the F1 car with their arms crossed.
Oh, that would be great.
Waiting for them to come out, right? So it's like, okay, I see. But now we know they're cool. So that night, when they start walking by the garage, I see they're leaving. I go out and I fucking grab them and start yanking them in our shop to come and see the cars. So we have the Pro Nitrous car, we have the 10.5 Supra, we have the IRS Supra, we have the I don't know what else. And we're letting them look at all the cars. And I'm just grabbing whoever, because I see there's guys there from Red Bull, there's guys there from Ferrari, there's guys there from Mercedes, so on. And I happen to notice one of the drivers it's Sebastian Buemi.
Oof.
So I'm like, how bitchin' is that, Sebastian? So I grab Sebastian Buemi and I yank him in the garage. And I take him over. And then the new car that we had at that time was the Lexus, the one that probably everybody has seen crash over.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or it went airborne a couple years later. But this was when it was brand new. And that car, we wanted to make something that, they have an F1 race there. EK displays his cars at the F1 race. He wants to have something where the F1 guys come up to it and they might not say it's total rubbish, right? So we specifically spent a lot of time when we built that car, and the stuff that we selected for that car wasn't typically used in drag racing, but we wanted to do it anyway. Like, for example, we have the steering wheel with a built-in display, just like in an F1 car, and a paddle shift setup so you could shift the car and all that kind of stuff. So I grab Buemi and I shove him in the Lexus and let him sit in there and tell him how it works and tell him how, the trans brake works. And I remember the guys looking at the turbos, and it's particularly the turbo on the 6-cylinder, and they're like, what the hell is that? It's like, yeah, that's a turbo. You're going to have those in about, 6 months or something, so get used to it. They were absolutely floored at the size of the nitrous engine. It was it's a Pat Musi 903, so it's 903 inches, and they were just absolutely blown away that you could have an engine that big, and you can start and run, and I remember a couple of the engineers they wanted to know if they could pick the rear tire up because we had the tires off the back of the ProMod car, and they went over to pick it up, and this guy nearly threw it through the roof of the building because he figured it was going to be, 300 pounds or something like that. He couldn't get over how light it was. So that was cool. So what you have there in that picture is me talking to a couple of the engineers from Ferrari about who knows whatever, me spewing on about the mouth like I am right now, talking about how great I am. And one of the photographers over there happened to capture it. And I thought it was a cool picture, and he let me have it, and I put it on my Facebook page. And then my good buddy Paul took that photo and had a poster-sized picture framed properly and sent it to me. So I like that. That picture's, I mean, dude,
That's very cool.
I know it's not me being hired by Ferrari. That would be better.
Well, it is,
Yeah.
just so you know, it was in my world. That's how I explained that picture to everybody. I'm like, yeah, he was a consultant for Ferrari.
And look, that's fine. It doesn't. You don't even have to say it, because if you show that picture, it looks like it's true.
I know.
You know what I mean? So like,
It's awesome.
working on a Formula One car, which I'm probably not going to be able to do. That was really cool. And to be honest, they were all very, very nice. They were really interested in what we were doing. Not interested enough to come over and actually watch us do it. They were certainly interested in the cars and the technology, and they were surprised to look at the car, because the stuff that they had seen, of course, was not at that level. Let me put it that way.
You would think they're car guys anyway, though, so they have to like it.
And that was the great part of it, was like at the end of the day when they were all standing down there, watching us. And then what they said after that night, they said, of course, you guys come down tomorrow and you can look at the F1 cars if you want. So we got the chance mostly to go do that. I didn't get much time to do it, but it was really cool. I mean, I wish I would have, broken the ice that first night, but maybe it wouldn't have worked out the way it worked out. It was really cool.
The F1 guys just seem like they'd be so snooty.
But I guess they're not. They're just regular guys. Maybe.
Until they see the size.
If it was maybe at a normal race, they might not have been so interested, but I think, look, you're in Bahrain, you finished working on your stuff. Here's some interesting, and by the way, there's this fat American yanking you into the garage. They may have thought they had to come in there, or their heads would have been.
Yeah, right.
Heads would have rolled, let's say.
Hey, just side note, I spent most of last night trying to Photoshop myself into that picture, but I couldn't make it work. So
yeah, that's cool. Just put your face over mine.
No, yeah. Hey, I got to tell you one thing. Marco was in the chat room, and he wanted to.
No.
Yeah, well, he wanted to call in. Oh, so did you see what he wrote?
No, I'm not looking at it. I'm just trying to focus on you guys.
Okay, well,
I'm you 100% of me.
Well, you should be for what we're paying for every minute.
I know, I get it.
I'm just gonna. I got to tell you what he said, because Marco is nuts, but he's actually pretty serious.
You mean when he first came in the room, or what he said after?
What he said after?
Okay.
Yeah. When he first came in, he said he's here for the gangbang, but he said he couldn't stay. But he said, I just want to say that Shane T is one of the coolest MFers I've ever had the pleasure to work with. His enthusiasm for all things with a motor is infectious and contagious. That's kind of the same thing. I'll get with him about that. Says
he added contagious, because when I originally typed that statement up and get it to him earlier.
Oh, he added that. All right, got it.
Yeah, he took some liberties apparently. No, I'll tell you what, Marco. When I first met Marco, I thought, man, who the fuck is this clown? He thinks he is like the best thing in the world. But I'll tell you something. Marco is the best person to have around you. He is always upbeat. He is always jovial. He has always got you laughing. He's always
great.
Reminds you that it's not really as serious as you want to make it out to be. You know what? And I'm telling you something. No one is willing to work harder than Marco and Wayne Potts at something. They absolutely got the shit kicked out of them with that GTR.
Yes, they did.
This season. Even I would have shot myself way early in the season, and they never gave up. And they didn't quite get the 6. I wish they would have, because they surely deserved it.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, for them to pull it off and make the car run its best ever on the last day of the season, hats off to them. We may not always have the GTR to race on that race team, but I surely hope we always have Marco and Wayne, because those guys are the kind of guys that you need on a team to be able to win a world championship, and honestly, I mean, anybody should just hire Marco just because he's so fun to be around.
Yeah.
And he makes you laugh every minute.
And he is brilliant, too. Just another side note.
He's smarter than he looks and sounds at first.
Well,
he is.
That's not hard. But you're right. He is. I think a whole lot of him. I like him a lot.
No, likewise.
Yeah.
Likewise.
So, all right. I got specific questions for you.
Okay.
I'm going to start on some of that.
Right.
And we can't go back to the beginning.
Specific answer.
I would hope. And they're all going to be later than when you're 14 years old. Tell us, if you can remember, like the craziest or the hardest problem that you solved, and make it a fun story so people don't start leaving.
Oh, are my stories not fun?
I didn't say that. You did.
It was very hurtful, Tom.
All right. I'm going to be in a timeout for a while.
Okay, all right. Okay, I got it. So I would say this is probably the all-time best solution that I was able to come to, probably in everything I've ever done. I was working at Motec. We had a dealer that was a dealer that used our equipment often and never really had any problems with it, made it work, wonderfully. And they called and said they had a M48, which is an older engine management system, one of the older ones that we used to sell. Anyway, they had an M48 on a car, and it was a running car. It was a sand rail, actually. And it was a running sand rail. And if I remember right, I think it was actually one of the Herbst brothers' sand rails. And so they had taken the thing out, and they had driven it through the desert, had fun with it, whatever, and brought it in for service. And since it came in for service, it won't run. So, we were dealing with them over the telephone, check this, check that, send me the data, look for this, look for that. And that probably went on, I don't know, let's say it started Monday, probably about Wednesday or Thursday. They finally called and said, okay, look, what's it going to cost for you to... Oh, my wife's calling.
Yeah, you want to put us on hold?
Yeah, go ahead.
House could be on fire. House could be on fire. Hang on.
Go ahead, take it. Hey, this is like our first intermission.
Should I get the girl from Ipanema music out?
No. But you know what? While we're in this intermission,
Okay, I'm back. The house is not on fire.
All right, well, time out. I got to shout out to two guys. We thought the intermission would be a little bit longer. I just got to say hey to Anthony and Josh. They stopped and saw me at Summer Nationals, and we had a nice long talk. Great guys, great listeners. Just wanted to shout out to them.
And Anthony's close. I told him last time, I think it's his work schedule. I'd like him to come in.
Yep.
Come in, sit in the show. It would be fun.
All right. Sorry, Shane. Go ahead.
No dramas. Right. So anyway, so I said, look, just come out here, and we can't figure it out. So they're only maybe like a half an hour away from shop. So, okay, I'm loaded for bear. I know this is not going to be easy. We've been dicking with this thing for 3 days on the phone. So I grabbed the scope, I grabbed the breakout harness, I grabbed a spare ECU, I grabbed some sensors, and I show up at the shop, and I plug in the laptop, and I crank the engine over, and it cranks, and I'm looking to see if there's a status that will come up and tell me if it's happy with both the cam and the crankshaft sensor. And it's a sync status. It says it's okay. So the status isn't okay. It's not happy with them both. But I have RPM, so I know that the crank sensor must be working, so the problem has to be the cam. So then I happen to notice the cam sensor is fucking hot. So I'm like, oh, that's not right. So then I look at the wires, and they had spliced the wires because they already had this problem where the thing wouldn't sync, and they were playing with the cam sensor and thought somehow the wires were backwards or whatever, and so they were swapping stuff around, and so 5 volt, 0 volt, and signal were all out of whack. So I got another sensor. We put them in the connector the way they're supposed to be. I am 100% confident this thing's going to synchronize. We put the cam sensor in, crank it over, still no sync, same problem. Now, there was some other stuff that was funny to me, but it didn't dawn on me at first. Well, first thing was, when the first time we cranked the engine over, I thought, wow, that battery is really good because it's cranking super fast. And the other thing I noticed was it had these headers, upswept headers, like headers on a boat that come up over the back of the transom.
Yep.
I was standing literally in front of the header while they were cranking it, and nothing was coming out the exhaust. But I didn't think anything about it. It was just cranking the engine with the throttle closed. So I get the lab scope out. I take a scope capture of the cam and the crank sensor signal. This is an LS1, and an LS1 has it has a 24 tooth wheel on the crankshaft with 24 evenly spaced edges, and the other edges are all unevenly spaced, so that it can pick up where it is in the half of the cycle quickly and start right up, I guess, whatever. So anyway, the bottom line is that the edge that is supposed to be the evenly spaced edge, I don't remember now which one it is. Maybe it's the falling edge. I recognize that it's the opposite edge that's even. So I'm thinking, how in the fuck could this be? It's a Hall effect. A Hall effect sensor can't have the wires swapped. About the only thing I can come up with is they've got the trigger wheel on the crankshaft pressed on 180 from the way it's supposed to be, like mirror image, right? They took it off, flipped it around, and pushed it back on. So I asked them, nope, crankshaft never came out. In fact, all we did was put a clutch in it. So I'm like, I'm just trying to think, how could you possibly have this sensor signal with the wrong side being equal? It doesn't make sense. It's almost like the engine has to be turning backwards. But then I'm like, fuck. I said, crank the engine real quick. I went to the back and looked at the crankshaft, and sure as shit, the crankshaft's turning the wrong way at the back. I'm like, come over here. I know what's wrong with it.
No.
So I'm like, crank the motor over. Look at the crankshaft. So everyone's looking, the thing's cranking over, no one's saying shit. I'm like, the crank's turning the wrong way. It should be going the other way around. That's why it cranks so fast. I'm like, no way. I'm saying, yeah, I don't know if you got the wires backwards on the starter or what. Like,
how the hell did that happen?
That's what I want to know.
Right next door to this LS1 sand rail is a fucking Honda sand rail, and they are bolting a starter in that one because they're just finished doing whatever they're doing to that one, and they hadn't gotten to the point where they're ready to start it yet. But what they had done is taken the starters off and set them on the shelf behind the two cars, and then went and grabbed. They look the same. Starters look the same, but one's reverse rotation because it's for a Honda.
Oh my God!
Bolted the Honda starter in the Chevy, and the Chevy starter in the Honda, and I fixed two at once with that LS1. And then I said, by the way, you could pay me for fixing your Honda because it was about ready to not start.
Yeah.
Did they pay you? Probably not.
Of course, they paid Motec, but yeah, look, it wasn't about getting paid. Of course,
No.
It was about solving that problem, and I probably figured it out in about an hour and a half. And they were like, "How did you figure that out?" And I said, honestly, I got lucky because I was staring at that pattern trying to understand why it looked backwards from normal, and I couldn't come up with it.
Right. What could possibly be, what could do this? You know, that's hilarious.
Without the scope, that car'd still be there.
The most recent one was, the most recent one I got my ass kicked on was about 2 months ago. I was with a client, Brian Fitzpatrick, running his drag. He's got a 2JZ powered dragster, running it in Vegas. And, you know, as simple as it seems in this day and age to me, the engine needs three things: air, fuel, and spark at the right time to run.
Yep.
And man, this thing had all of them, and it just had a dead cylinder, and we could not come up with the reason why, and I could not come up with the reason why. And it has a 6-channel CDI box on it, and everything's fixed in there. You can't change stuff around, can't move anything. But I am pretty convinced that it's got a dead number 2, because I mean that one EGT it never gets hot. You put your hand on the header tube, it's never hot. You know, I play around with all kinds of stuff, can't figure it out. I say, you know what, just let me go home. Let me go to the room. Let me think about it. A lot of times, if I have a real big problem with something I'm trying to figure out, I will go home. I will somehow dream the answer and wake up in the morning with I know what to do. So I did. That next morning I said, you know what, I know how I'm going to get to the bottom of this. What we're going to do, if that channel is really dead in the CDI box, if I take all the coil wires off and I move them over by one in the firing order and then go in and change the offset angle for the crank sensor off by one cylinder in the firing order, then every cylinder except that cylinder that we think is bad, the output on the CDI box, will run, including the number 2 cylinder that doesn't run now.
And it'll change, and it'll shut off another one.
Oh, a different one will be dead, but we'll know, hey, by the way, that one's dead because it's the one that's on that channel.
Right.
So I go do all this shit, we start it, and number 2's running. And the cylinder that's not supposed to be running is also running. So I'm like, okay, obviously it's not the CDI box. So now, what the fuck? So next thing you know, I go, hey, wait a minute. Hang on. And I look at the bottom of the intake manifold, and it's got nitrous on it. And it's got wet nitrous on it. And he just changed the nitrous solenoids. And so I go, okay, give me a wrench. And I take the line off that's going to the nitrous solenoid and start the motor, and it sprays fuel and I'm like, shut it off. And so what it had was basically the solenoid was leaking fuel past, and it had mechanical injection all the time into the intake. For whatever reason, it picked number 2 to not run, but because it's methanol, it would run good enough on the rest of the cylinders that you couldn't really work it out. So yeah, that kicked the shit out of me for,
wow.
I don't know, it's probably 12 hours.
That's crazy. We got a lot of wows on the chat room too. It's funny.
It's easy to get screwed up, you know. I mean, it's easy. Well, it's not as easy but the thing is, you're never in control of all of it, right? It's always, and man, it doesn't matter who it is or how well-intentioned they are. What did you change? Nothing. Nothing's been changed.
Yeah. Of course. Nothing.
That's everything that's ever been wrong with anything ever in the history of mankind.
Yep.
Nothing. I didn't change anything.
I couldn't agree more. I just had this conversation with Tom about talking to a guy for an hour that nothing changed. And by the time we were done, virtually everything changed.
Yeah.
Need to keep a logbook.
Right. Well, look, that goes hand in hand with the guys that say, hey, listen, I have the same motor as my buddy over here. It's exactly the same. He's got a small block just like me. It's just that I have airflow research heads, and he has Brodick heads, and I have an air gap intake manifold, and he's got individual runners, and I've got 12-to-1, and he's got 9-to-1, and I've got a fucking camshaft with 900 lift, and he's got a stock street cam. But other than that, they're exactly the same.
Yeah.
Can I use the map out of his car and mine?
Both V8s.
They are V8s. Should work.
All right. So there's this was actually asked on Facebook, but it was actually brought to our attention. And I think he had said something to Tom about it too. The Bonneville salt flat stuff.
Yep.
That to me has to be, I don't even know the right way to term it, but the most critical type of tuning you could do, because their on throttle time has to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
How long that they are. I mean, that's where everything really essentially stabilizes.
Absolutely, yeah. There is some stuff you can get away with in a drag race car that you cannot get away with in a Bonneville car. There is a saving grace. The saving grace at Bonneville is that any car, let's say, with more than about 1,000 horsepower has more power than you could put through the tires until you get some pretty good amount of speed built up. So you can't use full power for the entire 5 miles. But, for example, I've been lucky enough to be able to work with the guys on the Speed Demon land speed racing team. And that car, we set a record with it this year at 442 mile an hour. And that car spends about 25 seconds of its 65 seconds at full throttle, full boost.
Wow.
So you got to go run something on the dyno that makes 3,000 horsepower. I remember one time while I was working on this, it was actually a Speed Demon motor when it was a 4-cylinder back, probably 2007. And Kenny's like, I am not going to go to Bonneville and work on this thing on the salt. I'm going to run it on my dyno, and if it breaks, I will at least be able to fix it on my dyno. So he says, we're going to make a dyno pull from Bonneville on my dyno. And Kenny has one of the few dynos that common man can access that has the capability to program the load curve to match what the actual car, what the engine sees in the car. So, you know, you pick the point, you say, all right, start the dyno pull at 4,000, and after 7 seconds, let it be at whatever, 10,000, then drop it over 0.4 of a second to 6,500 and so forth. So we could program the exact boost curve, the exact RPM curve that the car ran in and run it. So I'm here to tell you at about 14 seconds into this probably 45-second long dyno pull, it is everything you can do not to try to run out the door of the dyno control room, because you've never seen anything do what this thing's doing for that length of time.
I'd want to tear my skin off. I could.
Oh, dude, it is like your skin is being torn off. It's so crazy. You take that same engine and you stick it in front of a driver and put a 40 or 50 thousandth thick piece of aluminum or steel firewall, then it's no problem.
Yeah.
Hold it open for 2 minutes, no big deal. But I'm standing in that dyno room. It is like you can see the back of the dyno room through the header. It's crazy.
Yeah, Mike and I talked about that the other day.
We had exactly that conversation. He's like, could you imagine doing a dyno pull like that? I'm like, absolutely, positively not. And he's right. You put a piece of 50 or 60,000 sheet metal between you. Hey, it's perfect. Let's go race.
Let it eat.
No problem. As long as you're out of sight, out of mind. Yeah. That's why I always call Bonneville the Great White Dyno. You know, every time I'm going there, I say I'm going to the Great White Dyno. It is a unique place. Anybody that's interested in cars or racing in any way, shape, or form, I don't care what sort of racing venue you've been to before, there is nothing like Bonneville. And I'll tell you what's really magical about Bonneville, other than obviously the history and the speed. It's going there to see 500 or 600 sometimes cars of every different make and form and type of construction that you could ever imagine. And some of this stuff, you're looking at going, man, don't even start that thing. I don't think you should even consider cranking in the engine because it looks too scary. But everybody's allowed, and everybody, from the guy with the deepest pockets to the guy that's there on the smallest budget, is having a great time. It just everybody owes it to themselves to go at least one time. And if you go once, you probably won't only go once. Go to Bonneville, go to Speed Week, go in August. It's a unique place to go. The venue is awesome. The people are killer. The cars are cool. It's definitely a connection to history and racing that I don't think you could get anywhere else. Maybe Indy.
Did anything surprise you? Like, I mean, what you learned about what an engine would really need under that load for that long? Or was it just kind of like after you got done with it, say, yeah, all makes sense?
It pretty much all makes sense, because the bottom line is whether you're working on a Bonneville engine or a drag racing engine, they all pretty much need the same things. You can get away with things further on the edge when you're only doing them for 4 or 5 seconds. The thing that I was the most amazed at, coming from a drag racing background, and I had worked on some standing mile cars, so I had done some amount of land speed racing. It just hadn't actually been on the salt. I'd watched, but I'd never tuned something. But I was thinking, man, we can go 228 or 230 miles an hour in a quarter mile. This is back when I first started going. And we can do that in 6 seconds. This is going to be a cakewalk. Going 280 miles an hour, we have 5 miles to do it. And I'm here to tell you, buddy, it is anything but a cakewalk. Imagine trying to go 250 miles an hour in 5 miles on snow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's about what that salt acts like.
Wow.
It's why people don't set records. There are people that have been going for 20 or 25 years. They still haven't set a record. It's hard.
Yeah.
By the way, when you set a record at Bonneville, you have to qualify for it.
Yeah.
And the next run is the only run of your life that matters, because if anything goes wrong on that record run, you qualify, right? You go to impound, they check all your stuff, make sure it's all legit. You have 4 hours to work on the car, fix it, repair it, whatever. Next morning you go to to do record runs in the morning. So you line up on your record run. If anything happens, a bolt comes loose, an oil line falls off, the tire goes flat, the chute falls out, you're done. You have to requalify, go through the process again before you can attempt a record again. And that's why it's so hard, and that's why those records mean so much, because it is anything but easy to do at Bonneville.
Do you go every year?
I have been fortunate enough to go every year for the past several. It got canceled on us a couple years in a row, and that built up a stockade of clients for me. Last year when I went, I had 11 clients. Wow. I hired a couple. I hired Wayne Potts. Actually had another project there, and that we were doing together with a motorcycle, and I hired him to come and help me take care of some of the overload, because this was my first year with the Speed Demon team. And so I wanted to make sure that we had everything covered. And most likely we're going to do something like that again this year, because we'll probably have another dozen clients, and one guy can't service them all. And, because everybody isn't running in order. You go and get in line at Bonneville, and when your turn's up and you run. And you could have all of your clients in line at the same time. But after one run, everybody's mixed up. There's always somebody running, someone needing data downloaded, someone needing, something calibrated, whatever. And so it takes more than one guy.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, you said something interesting about Bonneville, that traction's an issue. And we had one listener, actually a couple guys, asked, can you tell us something about your strategies for traction control, or is that something you can talk about?
Yeah. Traction control, traditionally within the Motec ECU, is probably better described. In fact, all traction control is probably better described as slip control because we're not actually adding traction. So we can't add any traction to the vehicle. All we can do is control the amount of wheel slip you have and try to control it so that we give the best acceleration we can give at a particular amount of wheel slip. But we can't actually add mechanical grip to the car to make it grip better. So it's a little bit of a misnomer. Traction control, sometimes it's misunderstood. They sometimes think that if the track is shitty but you have traction control, you can still go set a record.
Yeah, you can only go as good as the car can go.
Yeah, and the track can handle.
Yeah, you're limited to the grip on the track and the surface that you're racing on, and then the mechanical grip of the car, aerodynamic downforce, things like that. But the traction control does not fix or add any of those things. What it does do is make you consistent at being able to hold the car at its peak acceleration rate. And so what they traditionally do is compare front wheel speed to rear wheel speed if it's a rear wheel drive car, or you might use GPS as a ground speed to all wheel speed if it's an all wheel drive car. But it's actually quite a simple process to do traction control in almost anything except a drag race car with a slick. And that includes a drag radial car. Because you don't have the oscillation tendencies in the sidewall of the tire to deal with that you have to deal with a car with a slick on a drag strip. So the bottom line is, when you want to know what it's going to take to make the car accelerate the best, so what you do is you go send the car out in low gear and you give it intentionally too much horsepower so that it'll spin the tires. You try to do it in a gradual way so that it doesn't just immediately knock the tire off of it. But what you'd like to have, if it was a turbo car, for example, you'd like to have it take off and not have any wheel slip and then start adding power and generate some wheel slip and then maybe actually get to the point where the driver's uncomfortable and he lets off the throttle. So you can then go take that data and you know two things. If you have an accelerometer in your data log, you can look at the point where the wheel slip, that's rear wheels going faster than front wheels. You can look at the percentage of wheel slip that it takes for the G meter to peak and then start to roll flat. And you know that is the maximum acceleration rate that these tires will allow. And that is the maximum amount of wheel slip to achieve that acceleration rate. And so you then program that slip rate as your aim. And then you try to hold that slip rate. If it's an acceleration contest, like a standing mile, you attempt to add horsepower and hold that exact amount of slip and therefore that exact amount of G-force all the way down the course. The other parameter that you have in there is when the throttle starts to close, the driver is not happy with how much wheel slip there is. And it's not uncommon to have a vehicle, like a motorcycle, for example, like one of my clients that runs at Bonneville, Ralph Hudson. He set several records. He also runs out at El Mirage, and he set several records and won several championships with that bike. That has traction control on it, okay. But the amount of wheel slip that generates the best acceleration is not comfortable for Ralph to ride on at 200 miles per hour or however speed he's going. So what you find is that you then have to cater to what's comfortable for the rider or driver instead of the all-out acceleration of the car, because in the case of the motorcycle, it would like to have about 20 or 25% wheel slip, but Ralph is not ready to hold on to that thing with the rear tire going 25% faster than the front tire because it's also trying to swap ends, feels unstable, and feels like he's going to crash. And by the way, I mean, it's not just Ralph. It'd be anybody. I wouldn't get anywhere near it, but anybody in that situation would have that sense. So you use the driver input to determine what his level of comfort is, and you use the accelerometer to see what the mechanical acceleration should be, and that's how you pick where to set the traction control aim. And all you do is limit horsepower either by cutting ignition or timing retard or using drive-by-wire if you have drive-by-wire capability, or reducing boost if it's turbocharged, or using a blow-off valve if it's supercharged, or whatever method you need to use to try to hold the horsepower back so that it maintains optimum acceleration or optimum acceleration under the acceptable limits of the driver. And you just do that until you run out of horsepower.
Okay. I got a question on that. Like if you say that you're looking to maintain, like you're looking at your acceleration, your G-force, the indication of slip, I guess, would be that the acceleration drops, the G-force drops because you've lost traction, correct?
It would seem like that would be the case, but reality of it is the best acceleration is always with some amount of rear wheel speed going faster than front wheel speed. It's hard to put that into terms for a common person, but I think the amount of grip that's available when you turn a vehicle is based on the slip angle of the vehicle and the tires.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no grip without slip angle, and there is no grip without some amount of slip angle when you're accelerating, and that means the rear wheel's going faster than the front. And I've had it explained to me this way, it's not entirely clear, but basically, if the rear wheel wasn't going faster than the front, the car wouldn't be moving, it wouldn't be accelerating. It wouldn't be accelerating forward. It has to have the rear wheel going faster than the front. And in fact, in practice, when you measure the front wheel speed and compare it to the rear wheel speed, and there's a magic number coming here for anybody that's listening. And
yeah, I'm waiting. I knew that was coming. I was going to ask.
Almost now. Any vehicle that you work on, in almost any kind of tires that you work on, optimum acceleration rate will be around 8 to probably 12 or 14% wheel slip. That means that the rear wheel speed is going faster than the front wheel speed, between 8 and 14%. Now, that almost works all the time. I just told you a second ago that Ralph Hudson's motorcycle wants to be 25% slip for optimum acceleration.
Yep.
I don't know the reason why that is, but it is what it is. And so you don't tune to what Shane said works. You look at your data and you decide what works for the particular application by looking at the G meter, looking at the wheel slip, looking at the throttle trace, and that's how you pick what's best for each car.
What is it?
I can tell you from doing it for a long time that 8 to 10% on a car that does not have a slick. A slick car on a drag strip, usually more like 20 to 40% slip is optimum acceleration.
Not on a pro stock car.
On a pro stock car, it's the same, but it runs out of horsepower to be able to maintain, and everything does. Everything maybe other than a top fuel car, which I don't.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah, got it.
Runs out of the ability to continue keeping that tire slipping at 40% all the way to the other end of the finish line. A pro stock car, which I have been lucky enough to work on, is awesome in the first 50 or 60 feet that it runs down the racetrack because the engine is ahead of the car, and as soon as the clutch locks up with the engine, the car has to accelerate on only the power that the engine has available, and then it goes in the toilet. And that's the case with almost every kind of drag car. I mean, it just scales up. Again, I've never worked on a top fuel car, but a nitrous pro mod car just goes a little bit further down the track before it starts slowing down like it's a pro stock car. A turbo car typically has enough excess power that it will go much further down the track before it starts to have the same problem. But every single engine has the same problem. At some point, you run out of the ability to keep that tire spinning at its optimum wheel slip angle to generate the best acceleration, and then the G meter drops on the other end.
That's an amazing piece of information for everybody listening.
That really is. That's really crazy. I would imagine a turbo car, some of the turbo cars of today get pretty far down the track before they start to lay over, right?
Well, this one I'm working on the West Coast, I have the data open now. So let me look at the G meter. This thing has a lockup converter. So this one literally couples the engine directly. Unlike even a clutch will slip on a gear change. A lockup converter will not slip. The engine RPM drops and it sticks on top of the input shaft in the transmission. So this car on this particular run leaves the starting line at about 3.2 Gs. That's its peak. And then it kind of tapers off as it runs through low gear. And then the lockup comes in when it's in the middle of second gear. That is about 2.3 seconds off the starting line. the G meter goes to 3.5, and then it slowly tapers. Now that it's connected to the engine, it tapers down with engine speed, and then the further down the racetrack it goes as you start to run out of the overhead of horsepower versus what it takes to keep the car accelerating. So there's an example of a car, when that lockup comes down, it's like it leaves the starting line again, and you can actually see it from the starting line. Looking at it visually, you can see the car's going, it's going to, all of a sudden, holy shit, it just took off again. And if you think you notice it watching from the starting line, you should talk to Ed Thornton, who drives it, who comes back and says, damn, off when the lockup came in.
It's like it's another whole hit as it's going down.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, it is, okay, it doesn't have the difference that it has when it leaves the starting line because you're starting with no G and you go to 3.2, but it's, well, what is it right here when it goes to 3? So it's at like 2.3 and it jumps to 3.5. So I guarantee you, probably a really awesome street car like a Corvette or something with a bunch of horsepower, maybe it pulls 1G on the street in acceleration. Imagine you switch 1G on while you're already accelerating.
Probably going how fast? By
2.3 in? Yeah, it's probably 150.
I don't have GPS on this car, but at that point, it's probably going 150 or 160 miles an hour at that point.
Jesus. That's
so. In the whole vein of traction control here, I mean, thinking about this from the perspective that I do, you had mentioned throttle control, timing control. I guess realistically, the most instantaneous one has to be ignition control, correct?
Yeah, cut the ignition, but it's also coarse. So, for example, if I take the spark plug off of an 8-cylinder that's making 1,000 horsepower, well, it doesn't matter what it's making. If it's an 8-cylinder, I take a spark plug wire off, I lose 12.5%, right, instantly. And I can't get any less than, I either have 12% or I have all of it, 12% loss or all of it. There's no margin in the middle. Mm-hmm. But by using the throttle, which is a really, really actually very, very hard way to do it, or using ignition timing retard, because I can retard the ignition advance from optimum, I'm going to lose maybe only 3 or 4%, maybe 6%. So in practice, what ends up happening is you go out there with cut. Cut will give you a almost guaranteed amount of power loss, but it's harsh, and everybody can hear it. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying not to be caught doing it, cut's not the right way to do it. But what happens is, you start playing around with ignition retard before you start cutting the ignition. And you use the cut sort of as a ceiling where you say, I'm going to try and do it with ignition retard up to this point, and after that, I just want to cut the ignition because I can't handle that much wheel slip. The right way to do it, which I've done one time in 15 years, one person let me do this, is to run the engine on the dyno and then run it at every timing number you might consider using for traction control over its whole operating range that it runs in on the racetrack. So you look at a histogram of RPM from the last time you ran the car and you say, all right, this thing spends all of its life between 5,000 RPM and 8,200. So we're going to run it on the dyno between 5,000 and 8,200 RPM, and we're going to run it with the right timing, and then we're going to take, 2 degrees out and look how much it loses, and then build ourselves a map of the amount of timing retard at full throttle at different RPMs that it takes to subtract 2%, 4%, 6%. Okay, and then you build that map into your traction control algorithm, and you can put cut on top of that if you want. And now you have a really nice, seamless traction control that will use ignition retard, and because you've come up with the proper percentage of power loss, it becomes very easy to say, wow, I have 3 or 4% too much wheel slip. I need a 3 or 4% reduction in power, and I know the exact amount of ignition retard to get that at this particular operating point. And then it works like pure fucking magic. And unless you do that, you spend a lot of time, and it takes a lot of years to get enough experience to guess it right enough to make it work well.
Yeah, a lot of hunting and pecking to kind of hit your number.
Yep.
Right. So ultimately, what you find is that I told you that the magic number was like 8 to 14% wheel slip, right? Well, that's true, but not under every single condition, right? And one time I was working with as I was working with Prototype Technology Group. We were testing tires at where were we? We were at where is it? Where's the place in the middle of Florida? They have the 12-hour race.
Sebring.
It's gone. It's gone.
Daytona.
Sebring.
Yeah, no, it wasn't Daytona. Sebring. So we're
Sebring.
testing tires. Bill Oberlin is driving the car. Now, Bill Oberlin is one of the most awesome drivers that I've ever gotten a chance to work with. Not because he's an awesome driver, because he is an awesome driver, but because he really understands at a technical level how the car works and how the engine management and traction control are supposed to work with the car. So we're testing tires. Literally, all we're supposed to do, change tires, go make 10 laps, change tires, go make 10 laps. So me and Bill are like, hey, let's play with the traction control. So I'm like, man, I think the traction, because he would always tell me in a race, driving the car, he'd always say, look, the traction control's good, but I need to have an adjustment knob because in turn 1, I need more control than I need at the long sweeping turn 3 or whatever it is. And so he always needed a knob to adjust. He's like, can't you find a way to integrate that into the map somehow? So I'm like, it doesn't have that. I don't know how I can. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Okay, so one way I might be able to do it would be by lateral G and wheel speed. So let me see if I can set that up. And then I realized, what's better than that if I use lap distance. Because lap distance from start finish tells you exactly where you are on the racetrack as long as you've gone past the beacon twice. You're counting your lap. So me and Bill played for the better part of the day. They thought we were testing tires, but really we were testing traction control. By the end of that day, we had the most awesome working traction control that I ever had anything to do with, because Bill was able to go drive the car around the racetrack with the adjustments that I had made based on lap distance, make adjustments to the trim knobs, and radio back to me from the corner and say, oh, by the way, I had to go to number 3 in turn 2. I had to go to number 6 on turn 5. So I'm back in the pit area, typing up new shit for a new map. He comes in, they change tires. I load a new file in the car. He takes off. So at the end of the day, what we found was that we have a predicted lap time on the dash, right, that tells the driver once he goes past start finish where he is on the lap and what his predicted lap time is going to be based on his current position compared to the best lap he's done in the car. So he's watching the predicted lap time, and he's watching it, and if by the end of the day he's saying, I can go flat out in the corner and the predicted lap time is actually showing a decrease in lap time around those corners compared to if I try to drive it myself. And what's really bitching about Bill is he just wants to win. He's not one of these guys that has to say, I'm an awesome driver. I don't need traction control. I can do it without traction control. He doesn't care. If traction control makes me better, then that's what I want. And it was really cool to work with him the times that I got to work with him. He's demanding too, but that was really cool. That time doing track, it was really, really awesome. And then it was like, wow, it's too bad we couldn't have a GPS to do this with, because at that time we didn't really have a way to do GPS. But yeah, I mean, you can do some really cool stuff with GPS nowadays.
Oh yeah.
Really cool. I got more. How many countries have you worked in? I know it's a kind of a boring question, but I'm just curious because you've been all over.
Oh, I don't know. I think there's a Facebook thing that lets you type all the countries you've been to, and I think I've been to 11 or something. But Canada, Mexico, New Zealand, Australia, England, Bahrain, Qatar, Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Maybe that's it.
Still cool.
Aruba.
Oh.
Yeah, been a few different places.
Yeah. Mike?
I started going to Dubai, or started going to Bahrain actually in 2007. I've probably been to Bahrain now after 10 years. I probably have been there 60 times.
Oof.
I've been there a lot of times.
That's a cool place.
I've been there so many times that when the team manager, Haider Kuzad, takes me to the bar, the bartender, whose name is Smile, by the way, knows me by name.
In another country.
So I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's probably a little of both.
It's like an international version of Cheers.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, right?
Norm.
Yeah.
What So, Mike, next question.
I keep going back to the traction control thing because I think back to all the circle track guys that did this, because one of the things that happened, and I want to know if there is a strategy for this, and maybe in drag racing it doesn't really happen too much, but the circle track guys would burn stuff up left and right. When certain traction controls were coming out that would limit, or vary ignition timing, rapidly to try to get a hold of slip, they'd end up driving around with the thing pulling like 15, 20 degrees out, intermittently on and off, and they'd take the exhaust valves out of the motor. Does that not seem to be as much of a problem in the drag cars, or is that what you were talking about, like with fuel cut or ignition cut, I should rather say, like, where do you draw the line where I can't control this anymore with just ignition timing?
You stumped them.
First of all, the whole exhaust valves out of the engine, in 15 years, I have done some seriously stupid shit. In fact, more than once, I have done something I call the retard dyno, where I need to dyno a car and there's not a dyno available.
Was FUD there?
I just put the timing at like 5 after TDC and open the throttle in neutral and let it run up to the max RPM, and it takes about the same amount of time that it takes on an actual dyno pull. So you get your lambdas and all that, so you can check the map. Obviously can't check the ignition advance, but I have never, not one time ever, doing anything I've ever done, ever, had the exhaust valves fall out because I pulled too much timing out of it. Now listen, there's an exception to every rule. No doubt if you drive a car around with a timing at 5 after for hundreds of miles, there's no doubt you're going to probably fail the exhaust. And I've never done that, but I have done some pretty stupid stuff, and I've never had a problem with exhaust valves. But let's just say that you did have a problem with exhaust valves. Well, clearly the place to stop using retard is right where they fall out.
Mm-hmm. That's one way to do it.
I just didn't know if it became an issue at the drag strip, because I mean the circle track guys, they'd pull them long all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're limited. I mean, like if you use a distributor, you can't just retard the timing some odd number of degrees past TDC. It'll cross over inside the cap and fire the wrong cylinder.
Mm-hmm.
And it never fires the one behind because that one's got cylinder pressure on it. It's always going to the next one forward, so it fires at the wrong time. Way early when it shouldn't, and it breaks the engine. So, or if you're using wasted spark. If you're using wasted spark, you can't really back the timing up past TDC very much because it wants to try to, on overlap, fire, on the next cycle. And it lights on the, sometimes it speeds up the intake. Mm-hmm. So there are limitations to it, mechanical limitations to it, and the type of system that you're trying to use.
That's making sense now.
Mm-hmm. It also depends on the gross amount of horsepower you're trying to get rid of. And this is where people make a big mistake, I think, a lot of times. This is also like where turbos are absolutely 100% made for something like Bonneville. At Bonneville, like I told you, even if you have 1,000 horsepower, you can blow the tires off almost at will until you can get some speed. Well, at Bonneville, a turbo motor, when you take off the truck at 2,300 RPM, makes no boost. And if you're lucky, the driver can go full throttle on whatever engine he's got in the car, and it runs and it thinks it's normally aspirated until it starts getting some boost from the turbo. So the idea is keeping that 10% wheel slip number in mind, that you ought to probably shoot for a horsepower number that's about maybe 10 or 15% more than you can get on the ground, not 250% more than you can get on the ground. In other words, the streamliner that George Petit drives does not leave the truck and instantly go to 40 pounds of boost as soon as he opens the throttle.
Mm-hmm.
No chance we could ever put that kind of power to the ground. It sneaks up in boost by speed, or sometimes you can do it by gear, although you can get in trouble doing it by gear because of the abrupt change in the torque on the gear change and making the wheels spin like crazy. But anyway, the point is, you should never try to use a whole lot more power than you actually need or can get on the ground. It doesn't do anything. I'm sure everybody has had their street car when it rains. I mean, I know I surely did. It's like when it rains, it's like your street car has an extra 3,000 horsepower.
Yeah.
Because you can spin the tire as long as you want, right? So if you ever play with that game in the rain, if you go to the floor, you know that the car doesn't go anywhere. It spins the shit out of the tire and goes all over and does not accelerate forward. The best and most fun game to play is how much throttle can I keep feeding it to keep it accelerating while it's spinning but not out of control? Mm-hmm. And you notice the faster you go, the more you have to feed throttle to it, right? So that's the same concept with traction control. Same concept. You should not be trying to use way more power than you can use. And, that probably plays into straight line acceleration a lot more than around a road course. In a road course, driver's typically going to go after the throttle, but you know what you do? You vary the wheel slip by the throttle position so that the driver runs up to the point where he can feel, if he wants the car to be more loose, he can add more throttle, which is a natural thing, right? But you've got a hold of the wheels at part throttle, and the driver can just feed it throttle as he wants the back of the car to step out or whatever, and he can modulate it that way. So there's lots of different strategies to modify off of just strictly acceleration, particularly when you're in a sports car or some other environment. Yep. Now, there was something else. I told you earlier that typically you use front wheel speed versus rear wheel speed.
Yep.
A lot of the drag race stuff is not done that way because a lot of the control systems in drag racing don't have the capability of doing it, but also because typically a drag race car, a fast one anyway, doesn't have the front end on the ground. They've got no front wheel speed to reference from. In that case, you could use GPS, but what's more commonly used is a rear wheel speed or rear wheel RPM or axle RPM or drive shaft RPM based curve over time. So you start a timer when the run starts, you allow a certain amount of drive shaft speed for a given amount of time, and then you allow the wheel speed to either be faster than that, or you control right to that exact limit, or under that limit, or whatever you decided that it is you want to, whatever way you want to control. But it's typically done over time. And of course, the problem then with time is that time does not necessarily match up to the same point on the racetrack every time. Always. Let me say it a different way. So, the struggle in that is that if the track goes away, the same curve does not work anymore. Where if you were using wheel speed or ground speed versus rear wheel speed, you could literally leave the starting line in the water box, and if the control worked well enough, it would traction control itself all the way down the racetrack. It, of course, would not run what it would run when the track was dry and prepped properly, but it would run at its best acceleration rate. And unlike a timer, after 3 seconds, it wouldn't let you have, 3 times the horsepower that you needed.
That's an interesting concept. Starting at the water box. I like it.
Roll racing.
Yeah.
Yeah. They start behind the water box.
Way behind.
They're going 50 when they get to the water box.
Yeah.
We had another question. I got to get back to it because somebody. Oh yeah. One of our listeners just put in, of all the awesome cars you've got to work on, do you have a personal favorite?
Yeah, I mean, probably the best answer is any one that I'm working on at the particular time that you ask.
Oh, okay.
But if I have to pick a favorite of everything I've ever worked on, it's probably going to be the E-Canoe Racing IRS Supra. And the reason it's going to be that car is because that is the car that we started racing with in 2007. The car's retired now, but that car was never touched or engineered or constructed, or it was me, Hyder, and Ibrahim were the only people that had influence and input on that car. And to take that car from, the first time I went there in 2007, they wanted to run in the 9s, and we went 912. When we stopped running the car in the form that it was with IRS suspension still, it went 712.
Jeez.
And then we've converted the car to what they call stock suspension now in the rear, and it's been 652. Oof. But it's the same car. That car, by the way, used to be our Slanian's gray Supra. Was originally a road race car, then became the 9-second, 6-speed, first 9, whatever. Maybe it was 10-second then, I don't know. Gray or Onyx, whatever color they call it,
yep.
Supra that Bullish had.
Yep.
That's that car. And it's that same car right now. It's been modified. It's the same roof and quarter panels and core and shell of that race car, that was that original gray Supra that came from Bullish, has now gone 652. So we took that car from 912, from the first time I had anything to do with it, 912 to 652. So it took 8 years, okay, or 9 years maybe. Not something that happened overnight, but still the history in that car, that I would say that's probably my favorite race car.
Yeah, the guy that asked the question is extremely happy that it ended up being a Supra.
Was it Ibrahim?
No. Unless he's could be.
I just unfired myself.
Yeah. Well, listen, Shane, we I never know how to kind of wrap up a show because I could keep going, but we've taken 2 hours of your time at God knows how much a minute, so I don't even know how I'm going to afford it, but why don't you, if you don't mind, tell everybody how to get a hold of you, if you want. Fire away.
Best way is probably email, ShaneTech, ShaneTeck @yahoo.com. Secondly, send me a text message or a Facebook message. My telephone number, 714-318-5845. I would tell you to go to my website, but I am too lazy to have managed to re-up the name that I had since 1995, and somehow they got it from me, so I don't have one anymore.
Yeah, I looked at that.
Put one back.
I looked at that, and I'm like, this can't be right.
No, it's not right. It's not right. It is what it is. It happened without me noticing, but that still basically means it was my fault, but
I'm sure it's okay.
Being a one-man band. And the thing of it is, like right now, I'm getting away with it. I know that that's not the right way to do it, and I need to come up with something, but it's not a priority, let me say at this point.
Got it. Well, listen, we've appreciated your time, and I could tell Definitely. By the chat room, everyone has appreciated your time and your knowledge. There's probably another 2-hour show in your brain easily. Yeah, at some point.
I'd love to have him back.
I don't know. I feel like it's pretty empty. I think I've told you everything I know.
I somehow have a rough time believing that.
I've definitely told you everything Paul knows.
Well, of course. And speaking of Paul,
pass that up in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, I know. And he's probably crying right now.
Really, really, honestly, Paul said some really nice things to me. And to be completely fair, Paul has really helped me. I'll tell you something really, really quickly before we get off the phone here. So working at Motec for several years and then starting to do this for myself in the field, a guy named Ben Strader came into Motec, and I worked with him to do the version 3 training program for Motec before I left. And Ben Strader told me that he could calculate the pulse width that it takes to run an engine by knowing the injector size and the engine size, and he would be able to make the engine run. And he showed me how to do it, and all of a sudden the light bulb clicked on. I had already come from a computer background, and it made no sense to me to show up to every car and to try to tune it from scratch. I noticed that there was a commonality between all of these tunes, hundreds of tunes that I had done and data that I had. There was something related to the tune-up and the injector size and the engine size that made that all kind of come together. And Ben's the one that got me started on that, thinking along those lines. And then I started trying to do that same thing. And in fact, as my time progressed, 2006, 2007, I was trying different and unique ways to calculate it, built a bunch of spreadsheets, and I was building maps. And what I was doing is I'd go tune a car, and unbeknownst to everybody that's car I tuned at that time, I was always trying to see if my created map beforehand, how well it actually matched what the car really wanted, and then go back and work on my math again, but I could never get it right. And Probably, it's got to be maybe 2010, 2009, I don't know. Paul calls me and he says, "Hey, I'm Paul Yaw. I'm one of these rotary guys, and don't blame me for that, but I have a question for you about tuning because I cannot get these injectors to work on this engine, and I can't understand why, and so I was wondering if you could help me." And I'm like, "Look, it's the standard answer. That's a 1600 Bosch injector. It's never going to work. They're always like shit no matter what you're ever trying to run them on. It just is what it is." Because the injector's so big, because nobody really knew any better. So Paul says, I think I'm gonna investigate. I'm gonna build a flow bench, and I'm gonna figure out why. So I'm like, bitch and do it, so I don't have to do it. That sounds great. Try, see what you find out. In the meantime, he has a customer call with something, I don't remember, whatever, and he sends me an email and says, "Hey, can I buy a base map from you?" So my maps that I was doing at that time were really, oh man, if you saw them, it was like something no one would ever be able to figure out. There's one cell in the fuel table. I have comp tables in the background working on all kinds of shit. Anyway, so I never sold those as base maps because I knew if I sold them to anybody and anybody looked at it, I would just do nothing but answer phone calls all day long about how that could possibly ever work and it can't be right. So what I would do if I sold somebody a base map is I would, create them a normal looking map off of my generated data and send it to them. So I did this for Paul, and I went ahead and accidentally emailed him the wrong file. And so about a week went by, and Paul called me and said, "Now I got this base map. Just what the fuck are you doing in here with it?" So I told him, "Look, you're not supposed to have it. I don't give it to anybody. But the bottom line is, I can calculate almost exactly what it takes to make the engine run at full throttle from low RPM to high RPM. And you can start the engine, put it in lambda control, stick it on the dyno, go full throttle, make a dyno pull the data, adjust the map by the lambda trims, and you're done tuning full throttle." And he's like, "No fucking way." And I'm like, "Yes way." And he's like, "No fucking way." And I'm like, "Yes way." Anyway, so what happened is I tell him about this, and he's like, "Man, that's amazing. I really want to investigate that further." And him and I spent probably a solid year working on some software to do a better job of doing this. But the bottom line is I told Paul, I said, "Listen, it never works out perfectly right. I never get it right, and I don't know why." Well, by now, Paul's figured out the injectors are fucked up. And so he says, "Listen, I know why. Let's just try it with some injectors that I've characterized. The next engine you work on, throw these injectors in, try your stuff and see if it works." So I tried it, and it was way better. Still wasn't right because I had the math wrong because I'm not an engineer. But it was way, way, way better because I had made the assumption, as did everybody else all along, that the injectors did what I asked them to do.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a long time, like probably at least over a year. Me and Paul went back and forth almost every day until we built a piece of software that will generate a map that is so close now that you don't need to put it in lambda control. If you can characterize, just like every program, garbage in, garbage out, if you get the information right, this thing will puke out a map that will start, run, park, throttle down the road, and pretty much you maybe don't even have to tune it. If you do, it's just maybe some tweaks here or there based on the lambda trims. But the point I was trying to make was that this guy is like a big brother to me. He was just here in California probably a couple weeks ago, came over to the house. He's constantly looking out for me, sending me music from the 70s or books or whatever it is. The guy is like gold. So, I mean, I really hold the highest regard for him, but everybody does. And so I know I can get away being the only guy because no one else will. Call him out and tell him he's a dumbass and tell him he's stupid every chance I get because I feel like that's my duty to do that. But on a personal level, there are only a few people that I trust and look up to and respect as much as I do Paul.
Mm-hmm. He really is he's a good man.
Tremendous.
He really is just a good guy. Smart, funny.
I've known him now for a brief period of time, and just by certain interactions,
yeah,
I can tell the kind of person he is.
Yes.
Tremendous guy.
And it does sound like knowing what injectors do help you in your job too, no?
No, so that's the key. Like, so
Right.
everybody says, why don't you use this other injector? Well, the bottom line for me is that for what I do, it doesn't make sense for me to use any other injector because the data that I get from Injector Dynamics, notwithstanding that I'm friends with Paul and Tony, but realistically, those injectors make me a better tuner because they're a better tool for the job I'm trying to do. So for me, it's a no-brainer. I don't even want to use anything. I don't always get to use those injectors because, unfortunately, they are stuck in small engine, low fuel volume mode, and they will not make a properly sized injector for something that makes more than 1.5 thousand horsepower. But for everything else, it's going to be their injector. And it's the data that makes it important, and it's the data and the linearization table that allows me to let my software build a map that lets me get the job done in a quicker amount of time. So it just doesn't make any sense for me to use anything other than their stuff. Injector Dynamics for the win.
Believe it or not, that actually answered a lot of questions for me.
Yeah.
And it kind of filled in some gaps as to what areas were important and why.
Yeah.
That really helped a couple things.
Injectors to an EF, here I'm going to give you an analogy, a racing analogy, okay? And it's in injectors to an electronically fuel-injected engine are as tires are to a race car. Everything you do to the race car at the end of the day is based on the tires. And every single thing you do to an electronically fuel-injected engine, no matter how much money you spend on the engine management system, no matter how much money you spend on the electronics and the wiring system and the sensors and all of this accuracy and the interface of all of that shit to the engine is the fuel injector.
Wow.
So the injector is actually very, very important.
Yeah. Big statement.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. No doubt. So all that testing and all the equipment that he built and wrote programming for is not for no reason, but we knew that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Mike, anything else?
Yeah, there's like 70 more questions.
Well, yeah.
So I'd say we're gonna have to wrap this up.
I got all the time that you guys have, so if you want to go, fire them off, and if you want to try again some other day, we can do that too.
No, I think we're going to wrap it. And one thing I want to mention to you, we've been talking about this roundtable deal at the PRI show, and I've seen you've mentioned it, and I've spoken to some people, and we are going to try to make that happen. So stay tuned for that. We would love to have you back on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to be back on.
I actually have everything we need to do the roundtable thing. I mean, I need 2 small pieces of equipment, and I can do this anywhere.
Yep. Well, we'll keep you posted on that. Shane, many thanks. It has been a great show. I mean, not only me saying it, everybody's been saying it.
Oh yeah.
We knew it would be, but we will, and hopefully we will do it again soon.
Cool. So I'm not fired.
You are not. You are not
fired.
fired. You're the exact opposite of fired.
Check my bounce button.
Every day that I'm not fired is a good day.
Absolutely.
All right, brother. Again, well,
Listen,
yes, sir.
guys, what you're doing for the industry here and for the people, I think it's very, very important. That's why I was willing and actually happy to spend some time talking to you guys about stuff. I mean, the bottom line is I'm a race car guy. I'm a car guy. I like talking about. You can clearly tell I get excited talking about stories, about doing stuff.
Oh yeah.
Fun for me, but I think it's very important what you guys are doing, and I'm behind you 100%, and I will help you any way I can. And any time that the opportunity is extended to me to be back on the show, I would be more than happy to take advantage of it and be back on the show. And your thing at PRI, yeah, that'd be great. I think that would be really a lot of fun.
Okay. Cool.
Great.
Well, I think after everybody gets to listen to this one, it'll probably be easier for them to figure out what questions and what like this is.
Yeah.
This initial dialogue will give people the questions, like building on some of the things that we already talked about.
Yep.
And so I think round 2 would be, let's put it this way, a little more efficient.
Yeah.
I think we get more accomplished.
Yeah, plus I won't spend an hour talking about the history of everything I've done up to
Yeah.
where I am now.
No, you weren't bad.
But I got to tell you that
like the Formula
go-kart,
One.
that
I know.
go-kart with the
great.
air pump story, that's unbelievable.
It was really great, and it lends some insight into how you've gotten where you are. So We appreciate it.
The amount, like especially again on nitro, man, that thing was. So, one time. Here's how we got to lightening the flywheel, and then we'll go. Okay, the stock Stratton flywheel weighs like about 5 pounds, has all these little fins on it to blow air over the cooling fins on the engine to cool it off. So when we put enough nitro in this thing and get it kind of running right, you whack the throttle and it fucking shears the keyway off in the flywheel. The crank tries to out accelerate this giant flywheel. So my dad and Jeff and I, we go, oh fuck, it would be way better is if the flywheel was way lighter. Then it would accelerate. It wouldn't break the keyway off anymore. Okay, cool. So we take the flywheel off, go stick it in the lathe, cut this thing down, but we want to leave the fins so it can cool itself off, right? So we go bolt the flywheel back on, start the engine. About the third time, there's this ting tang, and there's all these dents in the little starter, the pull starter cover, and it's flinging the teeth off. Now that the flywheel, yeah, the thing was bad. I should build another version of it.
Just because. You really should.
And put an M1 on it. Or direct. I do direct injected. Go get a motor from Harbor Freight. And then, 5 gallons of nitro.
Oh, my God.
I could have the world's most expensive lawnmower.
Yeah,
I've seen them splitting those V-twin Harbor Freight blocks in half already with turbos. So
that's next.
That's good. That's good. The good news is it's $150 to replace the whole thing.
That's right.
Basically.
Right.
Come in with a warranty claim. I was just idling. I didn't do anything.
I just started it and that happened.
But that's how it always happens anyway.
True.
Yeah.
Right.
I was pulling off an off ramp and
it was idling sometime and it broke.
Yeah. All right, bro. We appreciate it.
Cool. Me too. Thank you guys.
Yeah, man.
Thank you
we'll
very
do it
much,
again.
Shane.
Thanks.
Thanks, Shane.
See ya.
See ya.
Got to say that was interesting from beginning to end.
He's like in a different league. He really is.
Well, because everything he had an explanation of why.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that a lot of people that are listening, they've kind of got the same train of thought that I had, and this connected some dots in a couple very specific areas for me. And I hope everybody realizes like some of the little nuggets that are in here when you go back and listen through, because as soon as I get this done, I'll be doing it again, because there's a lot of neat little pieces of information in there you can pick up.
A lot.
An awful lot.
Just to think about some of the stuff that we talked about and he's done. It's next level. It really is. Very cool.
It makes me quiet.
I know. I was worried about you actually.
Well, no, and
not that you were gonna have a stroke, but you usually just yapping and.
Well, he ran out of Diet Coke, so.
Well, that was a problem too.
Yeah,
and inhaling that ice cube partway through didn't do me. I'm like frantically waving to Tom, give me a cup of fucking water.
And we all banged into the mic at least once.
Yeah, at least once.
Yeah, good.
But I was quiet because I was listening and taking in everything he said.
Yeah,
and. Even the story getting started was pretty damn. I got to tell you, that lawnmower motor cracks me up.
I know.
That's hilarious.
I wouldn't put it past him to do another one just to do it.
I like the Formula One.
Oh, of course. Of course you did. That was a cool story.
No, but I like it was revving it up,
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they come back for the Formula One car.
And at that time, they were probably on the chip at 18,000 RPM.
Ring.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the one thing we got to tell everybody is like, look, we know we had you put questions on Facebook, but it's just it ran much longer than we anticipated.
Yeah, and it's hard. But we got a lot of questions in.
No, we did, and I tried to look, and then the computer started dinging.
Yeah, I know. That's never happened before. Of course,
out of the clip, I opened Facebook, ding,
I know.
Stupid noise.
That's
what it was.
Never heard of it.
And so I'm like, and I panicked and I closed. So, all right. Well, funny. Anything else?
No, just thank everybody for being here, man. We had a lot of listeners. Holy God. Did we go over 100?
I don't know, but I don't know
it's
where
high
that was.
80s most of the time.
And it was up and down, so I don't know if that was disconnects, reconnects, because when the big numbers fly, it doesn't matter. The one that matters in the end is downloads.
Oh yeah, of course.
See how that goes.
Yeah, I know, but it's nice to see it.
Well, I'm mostly interested in that one because that's going to lose you $100.
I hope it does, man. It'll be the best 100 I ever spent. Well, one of.
All right.
Oh yeah.
Well, I guess we'll be back next Monday, and I don't know who's going to be next. Do we even have anybody lined up?
Who wants to follow that?
No.
Yeah, right.
Not me. I'm going to stay home next week. I'm just going to push a button and go my bedroom, watch TV.
Yeah. All right.
All right, we'll see you all next week.
Good night, everybody.